Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a place where time doesn't tick. It drips. Imagine yourself standing in the golden dust of an ancient Sumerian city. The air is thick with incense and warm bread. The sun hangs low like an angry god, and the streets are a maze of clay walls and quiet stairs. You're probably barefoot. Everyone is, except maybe the high priest, whose sandals are made of something fancy, like woven reeds or smugness. This is Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, land between rivers, and birthplace of the world's most ancient timekeeping tools. No clocks, no watches, no timers on the microwave you definitely don't have. Just water, clay, and the eternal whisper of patience. And honestly, you probably won't survive this world unless you're on time for absolutely everything. Because in ancient Sumer, the gods are watching. And the gods are punctual. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop that in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing near a ziggurat, one of those step pyramids built by hand, brick by brick, in a land where overachiever was apparently the job description for every architect. You squint upward, and there it is, a towering structure basking in the last light of the day. Each tier of sun-baked clay echoes with the footsteps of priests, messengers, and annoyed scribes. And down near the base, near a shady colonnade, an old man in a linen robe gestures for you to come closer. He's got a clay bowl in one hand and a jug of water in the other. No, he's not thirsty. Not yet. He's about to measure the divine passage of time. You sit beside him and the ground is warm. Everything is warm, even the water. And yet, it's calming. This quiet act of pouring liquid into a bowl, watching it rise, watching it fall. The man speaks softly, describing how each mark on the inside of the bowl represents a segment of time. When the water level reaches the next mark, it's time for a prayer, a chant, or someone's daily grain ration. Lucky them, time here isn't just measured, it's honored. It's scheduled by the gods, not the marketplace. And it's tracked not by gears, but by gravity. Around you, the city pulses with its own rhythm. A goat bleats in the distance, probably late for an appointment. A scribe curses under his breath as a wax tablet smudges in the heat. Somewhere nearby, a child plays with a palm leaf toy, utterly unaware that he's doing so during what this priest refers to as the third mu, a Sumerian time division that basically means somewhere between now and when your bread burns. You ask the priest how long he's been doing this. He smiles and points to a faint notch on the wall. Since before that mark. Well, that clears it up. Here time feels thick. Not fast, not slow, just dense. It hums through the alleys. It echoes off the mud brick walls. It drips, literally, from every Klepsidra, every water bowl designed to tell priests when to move, when to chant, when to snooze discreetly and call it meditation. And yet, there's something oddly reassuring about this whole process. You're not scrolling. You're not refreshing your inbox. You're just watching a clay bowl fill with water and waiting for it to tell you something important, something timeless. The priest offers you the jug. You pour, a gentle trickle. It splashes against the bowl's inner curve. He nods approvingly, as if you've passed the first test in a very sleepy ritual. Congratulations. You're now part of a 4,000-year-old timekeeping tradition, and your only responsibility is not to spill anything. A soft breeze pushes past. Somewhere, a reed flute begins to play, completely off-key and yet totally charming. You're not sure if it's a signal or someone just learning scales, but either way, it fits. Historians still argue whether these early water clocks were accurate, ceremonial, or both. Some say they were used only in temples. Others insist they timed everything from court proceedings to grain storage. One recent theory suggests they may have even been portable, early versions of what we'd now call a clock on the go. Ancient Uber Eats for prayers, if you will. As the sun dips below the horizon, long shadows stretch across the courtyard. The bowl is nearly full. The old man claps once. Somewhere nearby, a bell is rung. Time has passed. Time has been acknowledged. That's all anyone here needs. You stand slowly, your legs a little stiff from sitting cross-legged too long. The priest bows and you return the gesture. A simple transaction, your time for his wisdom. Fair enough. You walk back through the city's narrow lanes. Clay houses glow with the last warmth of the day. The scent of baked barley floats through the air. Someone's roasting lentils and probably arguing about trade routes again. Even arguments sound sleepy in this place. You pass a wall etched with cuneiform, the world's oldest writing system. Little wedge-shaped marks that once meant taxes, offerings, or instructions for building a goat pen. But they also mean something else. That someone was keeping time, recording events, naming the moment. And now, so are you. You wake, or maybe you never quite fell asleep, at the soft shuffle of sandals over baked earth. A young boy is tugging at the sleeve of your tunic, his other hand holding what looks like a misshapen clay pot. His eyes are wide and he's talking fast, too fast for this hour, but you catch the gist. The temple needs more water clocks. The priests are gathering for an evening observance, and someone, somewhere, knocked over a very important bowl. So you follow him. The temple workshop isn't far. Just past a row of fig trees and a cluster of goats that refuse to acknowledge your right of way. The building itself is low, wide, and smells like a mix of burnt resin and damp clay. Inside it's cooler, quiet, reverent. Rows of half-formed vessels rest on stone benches, their sides etched with careful lines, time marks. A woman sits at a spinning wheel, shaping a fresh bowl from wet clay. Her hands move with the calm authority of someone who's been doing this for decades, maybe centuries, maybe since before the wheel itself. She doesn't look up as you approach. She just nods slightly, like she's known you were coming all along. This is where the magic happens, if you can call it that. The Mesopotamians were nothing if not practical. Time here is tactile. The Klepsidra, or water clock, is a simple but ingenious device. Fill a bowl with water, let it drain slowly through a small hole, and mark how long it takes. Do it enough times, in enough ways, and you've got a surprisingly consistent system. Especially impressive when your main competition is the sun, which, frankly, doesn't always show up. You kneel beside another bowl in progress. The inside is grooved with tiny notches, each one indicating a specific time unit. Historians still argue whether these marks were standardized across cities or if each temple had its own quirky version. Some believe time intervals were based on chance. One hymn of Ishtar equals one segment. Others think they were tied to daily rituals. Time to feed the goats, time to bathe the statue of the god, time to pretend you're not napping behind the barley jars. You run your fingers over the clay, feeling the slightly raised lip where the water would have exited. There's a humility to it. This isn't a Rolex. It's not even a sundial. But it works. And more importantly, it meant something. One potter, an older man with a long gray beard and an even longer sigh, tells you about the sacred math behind it all. The Sumerians loved numbers, especially ones that divide neatly, like 60. That's why our hours still have 60 minutes, and why you feel personally attacked when a microwave counts down slowly in awkward base 10 seconds. You have the Mesopotamians to thank for that creeping existential dread. They used base 60 or sexagesimal math, which sounds a lot spicier than it is. Basically, they liked dividing things evenly, and water, of all things, divides beautifully. One clay bowl might represent an entire hour. Another, a mere 15 minutes. And they'd time the outflow by crafting tiny holes in just the right spot. Too wide and the water gushes out like your bathtub drain after a bad day. Too small and you've got yourself the Mesopotamian equivalent of a buffering YouTube video. As you listen, you notice a small shelf lined with finished water clocks, each one labeled in cuneiform. There's one for temple use, one for market tolls, one for measuring speeches. Apparently, if your toast to the king went longer than 2 bowls, you were considered too fond of your own voice. Some things never change. The woman at the wheel finally looks up. Her fingers are stained, her expression unreadable, but there's kindness in the way she gestures toward a nearly finished Klepsidra. She dips her hand in water and traces a slow circle around the rim. She whispers a name, Namu, the primordial goddess of the sea, creator of heaven and earth. The water in the clock, she says, is her. Every drip a drop of her eternal essence, flowing through time, reminding mortals to stay humble, and punctual. You glance at the other workers. No one blinks. This is normal, and maybe that's the secret here. In a world without alarms or wristwatches, time is sacred, ritualistic, lived. It flows like the Tigris and Euphrates, sometimes gently, sometimes furiously, always forward. A boy drops a pot somewhere in the back, and someone mutters an ancient curse involving donkeys and bad omens. You decide now might be a good time to help. Gently, you carry one of the finished clocks toward the temple steps, careful not to spill a drop. Outside, the sky has darkened into a soft, velvet indigo. Stars blink overhead, and the moon casts a silver trail across the stone. Another priest waits at the base of the ziggurat, arms folded, clearly not a fan of delays. You place the bowl on a pedestal and step back. The ritual resumes. You watch as the water begins to flow again, a tiny stream echoing the eternal passage of time. A chant rises. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks in perfect rhythm. Time moves, and so do you. There's no rush, no deadline, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for the people of ancient Mesopotamia, the past was counted one drop at a time, and tonight you're part of that flow. You settle near the temple steps, just out of the priest's line of sight. Not that he minds you now, you've helped, you've shown respect, and you haven't broken anything important. That already puts you ahead of half the apprentices in town. The bowl fills slowly, steadily. Each drop sounds louder in the evening hush, as though the entire city is listening. Maybe it is. You lean your head against a warm pillar, eyes half closed. Somewhere nearby, an older priest begins to recite a hymn. It's ancient, slow, and lilting, less like a song and more like a spell. Something about Enlil and the winds, about the order of things, about what happens when people forget to look up. And suddenly, time itself seems tired. Not lazy, just aged, heavy, like an old storyteller who's seen too much and speaks only when necessary. You realize, time isn't just something that ticks forward in a straight line. Not here. Here, time loops, folds, circles around itself. It pools at your feet and evaporates with the morning sun. This world doesn't measure seconds. It measures moments. A woman walks by with a bundle of dates and honey cakes, her veil fluttering in the breeze. You catch a whiff of cinnamon, and for a brief second, you feel like you've been here forever. Like you've lived a dozen lives beneath this same sky. And maybe that's what the Mesopotamians understood better than we do now. Time wasn't a nuisance. It wasn't something to beat, manage, or optimize. It was a gift from the gods, offered one drop at a time. The bowl doesn't rush. The water doesn't worry. It simply is. You wonder what happened to that mindset. Today, we wear time on our wrists, cram it into rectangles on calendars, and divide it down to the millisecond. We're taught that time is money, that if you're not being productive, you're falling behind. But in this ancient courtyard, under the stars and slow breath of history, time is presence, stillness, surrender. Another chant begins, this one softer, almost like a lullaby. A group of children arrives, led by a teacher with a wooden pointer and a serious expression. She motions for them to sit, then gestures toward the water clock. This, she says gently, is the breath of the gods. You smile. That's one way to describe it. The children lean in, fascinated. One of them reaches toward the bowl, only to be gently redirected by the teacher. You don't touch time, she says. You feel it, and you do. You really do. You close your eyes. You're no longer in a YouTube video. You're not in bed, or on the train, or wherever you started this journey. You're in the cradle of time itself, where rivers shaped civilizations and water whispered the hours. You're in Uruk, maybe, or Nippur. You've got dust on your fingers, a sandal that doesn't quite fit, and a strange sense that you belong here more than you should. And as you drift, the last thing you hear is the priest's voice, low, firm, eternal. The water tells us when, the stars tell us why, and the silence in between is where we become. You sleep well tonight. Ancient time is kind. When you open your eyes again, you're no longer nestled in the courtyard of a Mesopotamian ziggurat. Instead, the warm dust has shifted beneath your feet, and the scent of sweet dates has been replaced by something cooler, drier, papyrus and lotus blossoms. The low hum of a bustling river echoes in your ears, and nearby, a reed boat creaks softly as it bobs in the current. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where the Nile divides the land like a divine spine, and time is tied not to minutes, but to the sun god's great celestial commute. You're standing beside a quiet temple in Thebes, shaded by sandstone columns carved with the names of pharaohs who've long since been embalmed. It's midday, or maybe it's mid-decade. Egyptian time doesn't hurry. Here, time flows like the river itself, in rhythms, in cycles, in floods and retreats. And you notice something strange. Near a shaded nook, a tall stone pillar catches the sunlight just so, casting a sharp-edged shadow onto the ground. A young scribe kneels beside it, squinting as he marks the edge of that shadow with a piece of charcoal on a polished stone surface. No ticking clocks here, just a shadow clock, or as they sometimes called it, a gnomon. It's elegant in its simplicity. The position and length of the shadow tells you everything the ancient Egyptians needed to know about the time of day. Why rush? The scribe murmurs as he draws another mark. When RA is right on schedule, and he's right. The gods themselves were Egypt's timekeepers. RA, sailing his solar bark across the sky, was more dependable than any alarm bell. Every dawn was his rebirth. Every dusk, his journey into the underworld. Your day isn't ruled by numbers. It's ruled by myth. You crouch beside the scribe, and he offers you a half-smile. We divide the day into 12 parts, he says, but only the daylight. Night is trickier. He gestures toward another device, smaller, portable, shaped like a flattened T. It's a handheld sundial, meant to be tilted toward the sun at specific angles. Handy if you're, say, an official needing to arrive punctually to the temple, or someone whose job depends on pleasing a rather punctual pharaoh. Of course, it's not perfect. If it's cloudy, the whole system goes out the window, which, ironically, didn't exist in most mud-brick Egyptian homes. The Egyptians, like the Mesopotamians, weren't obsessed with time precision. What mattered was harmony. The rising and falling of the Nile marked planting and harvest, not calendar reminders. The procession of stars at night wasn't a curiosity. It was a sacred schedule. The ancient Egyptian star clock, painted onto the ceilings of tombs, mapped out the rising of different constellations across the hours of the night. Historians still argue whether these star clocks were used only for ceremonial purposes, or if they played a more practical role in everyday timekeeping. Either way, it's a celestial symphony above your head, and every star sings its part. You look up now, and even though it's bright midday, you can almost see the lines of the sky drawn in ink and gold. Goddess Nut arching overhead, stars nestled in her belly, marking time not as numbers but as stories. A priestess walks past you, balancing a tray of incense. She hums softly, something rhythmic, perhaps even timed with her steps. You wonder if her entire routine has been calibrated to the turning of Ra's great wheel in the sky. You try to imagine life here. No clocks on the wall, no countdown timers, no snooze buttons. Just light and dark. Plant and harvest. Ceremony and sleep. And yes, sometimes naps in the shade. The shadow has moved now. The scribe marks the stone again and gently wipes away the earlier line. Time to him is not a thing to keep. It's a thing to notice. You watch him sigh, stretch, and pour himself a ladle of water from a nearby jar. Then toss a crumb to a lurking cat who's clearly clocked his feeding schedule with great accuracy. Time flows differently here. Not slower, not faster, just calmer. Measured in shadows and seasons, in the soft glide of the sun and the hushed breath of the wind off the river. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe time doesn't need to tick. Maybe it just needs to breathe. You lean back against the warm stone wall. Somewhere nearby, a distant gong rings from the temple. You have no idea what hour it is, and honestly, you've never felt so on time. You blink again, and when your eyes adjust, the warm sandstone of Thebes gives way to something rougher, colder. The soft rustling of Nile reeds is replaced by the quiet muttering of camels, the metallic clatter of bronze, and the distant murmur of trade in the air. You're in ancient Persia now, perhaps around 500 BCE. The mighty Achaemenid Empire stretches from the Indus River in the east all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. You're standing in the heart of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital. Towering columns rise like forest trunks, etched with winged bulls and royal processions. But today, you're not here for an audience with King Darius or Xerxes. You're shadowing someone more practical, a royal timekeeper. Yes, they had those. He's older, with a tightly knotted beard and an expression that says, "I've waited decades for the sun to cooperate." At his side, a water clock, not quite Mesopotamian, not quite Greek, but something uniquely Persian. It's larger than the Babylonian ones, and he calls it by a name that sounds like Fenjaniab. You follow him to a small dome structure near the palace gardens. Inside, it's cool and dim, the air scented with dried rose petals and copper polish. A tall bronze vessel dominates the center. It's filled with water. Suspended just above it is a bowl with a tiny hole drilled in the base. As water slowly drips into the bowl, it eventually sinks. The sinking time? Roughly an hour. That's right. You're watching the Persian version of a time capsule, only this one fills itself up and drowns. Repeatedly. You can't rush wisdom, the timekeeper murmurs, eyes fixed on the bowl. You can only time how long it takes to arrive. That's probably on a clay coffee mug somewhere in Persepolis. Unlike their Egyptian and Mesopotamian neighbors, Persians started to apply timekeeping to logistics on a grand scale. After all, they governed an empire that spanned thousands of miles, 20 provinces, and nearly as many languages. They needed to know when to send envoys, when festivals would align across regions, and perhaps most importantly, when dinner would be served to a notoriously punctual king. Historians still debate whether Persian water clocks were standard in administration or primarily ceremonial. Some believe they helped coordinate shifts in fire temples, where priests kept eternal flames burning through the night. Others think they were just incredibly fancy egg timers for royal banquets. But either way, you're mesmerized. Every time the bowl sinks, the timekeeper retrieves it, gently empties it, then resets the process. There's something almost meditative about it, like watching waves roll onto the shore or sand fall in an hourglass, which didn't exist yet. By the way, that would be a Roman thing. Outside, the sun starts to dip below the cliffs. You step into the open courtyard, and a group of scribes is preparing for an evening ritual. They too glance at the timekeeper's bowl before unfurling a linen banner and beginning to chant. Each note is timed not to a metronome, but to the slow rhythm of the bowl's descent. You take a breath. Even the air here seems to follow a schedule. The scent of cardamom and saffron wafts from a nearby kitchen. Someone is grinding something in a mortar with a rhythm that could easily lull you into a light doze. The timekeeper waves you over again. He holds up a second bowl, this one smaller with a slightly larger hole. "Faster time," he says, tapping it with a wink. For when the king is hungry, apparently even in ancient Persia, lunch breaks could be political. He lets you try it. You hold the bowl steady above the water. Fills, drips, sinks. You pull it out, water splashing onto your sandals. Took about 45 minutes. You're not sure, but you do feel oddly accomplished. There's something soothing about being this close to the rhythm of things, of watching time pass as an event, not a number. Back at the palace, a procession begins. Torches are lit, and drums start to beat in slow succession. The timing? Synced, you guess, with the water bowl cycles. Time here isn't a countdown to anything. It's a steady march, a way to stay in harmony with the empire, the gods, and maybe even your digestion. You glance once more at the bowl before it sinks again. The timekeeper nods to no one in particular and smiles. His day is measured, not rushed. His moments don't tick, they trickle. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of time you've been needing all along. You're standing now on a pebbled shoreline, and for a moment you wonder if you've wandered into a dream, or into a merchant's postcard stand. The sea is impossibly blue. The air smells of olive oil and ink, and somewhere nearby, someone is trying to convince a goat not to eat a scroll. Welcome to ancient Greece. It's around the 4th century BCE, and you're in the port city of Piraeus just outside Athens. Traders are unloading amphorae of wine and oil, and philosophers are arguing over lunch as if it's the Olympics of debate. But you're on a mission to find the elusive Klepsidra, the Greek version of the water clock. Now, the Greeks didn't invent water clocks, but they were the first to make them competitive. Literally, you step into a modest public building that smells of damp stone and civic anxiety. A crowd murmurs in anticipation. You're at the law courts, and inside, a trial is underway. But not just any trial, one time down to the drop. On a stone pedestal near the speaker's platform sits a narrow-necked ceramic jar, filled to the brim with water. Next to it, another jar, empty, waiting. The speaker approaches, nods to the clerk, and the water begins to flow. This is the Klepsidra in action, a timekeeper by way of gravity. The prosecution has the duration of one draining jar to argue its case, about 6 minutes. No more, no less. You lean closer. There's no ticking, no dramatic gavel. Just a thin, almost musical trickle of water into clay. And that's the funny thing. The Greeks, for all their drama and theater, preferred a quiet timer. Perhaps they believed that judgment should flow smoothly, without interruption. Or maybe they were just too frugal to hire an intern with a sundial. Historians still argue whether every courtroom used clepsidra, or just the ones in major cities like Athens. There are even theories that different jar sizes were used depending on the severity of the case. 6 minutes for theft. 12 if someone insulted your goat. But beyond courtrooms, the Greeks found more peaceful uses for their watery metronomes. You wander away from the trial and into a gymnasium. Not the sweaty kind with mirrors and motivational slogans, but the Greek original, part fitness center, part school, part social club. Here, clepsidra help pace debates, limit bath times, and probably settle arm wrestling disputes. One philosopher is waxing lyrical on the nature of virtue, while another quietly swaps the clepsidra for a bigger jar. You pretend not to notice. Later that evening, you're invited into a scholar's study. The room is lined with scrolls, fig biscuits, and a single clepsidra carved with the face of Hermes. He's the god of travelers, thieves, and apparently punctual philosophers. Your host explains how early Greek water clocks were quite simple, just an upper jar with a small hole dripping into a lower vessel. But the later versions? More clever. Some even had float mechanisms that pointed to time markings or made small levers tilt to ring bells. Others had chains, pulleys, or even singing birds, all powered by a steady drip. He pours you watered wine and chuckles. Time isn't money. Time is just wet. You toast to that. Because really, what could be more relaxing than measuring your schedule by the soft gurgle of water through terracotta? Outside, the crickets have started up. Somewhere in the agora, a group of young Athenians is debating whether love is a kind of madness. You walk past them, their voices blending with the low burble of fountains and the crunch of your sandals on marble dust. You pause at one last clepsidra, this one placed beside a public bath. A man waits, towel over his arm, eyeing the water line. When it empties, he enters. His bath will last precisely the time it takes to refill. There's an elegance to this. Time, here, isn't a whip. It's a gentle boundary, a way to give form to moments without drowning in them. You stretch. Maybe it's the wine, maybe the acoustics of dripping water in stone chambers, but you feel calm. Not bored, not restless, just in rhythm. The Greeks might have argued endlessly about truth and virtue, but when it came to time, they seemed to know that it should pass like poetry. Slowly, evenly, and preferably while reclining. You smile to yourself. Maybe you won't be on time tomorrow, but for tonight, you're exactly where and when you need to be. By the time you stumble into Alexandria, your sandals are dusty and your toga has seen better days. But any lingering discomfort fades as you gaze up at the gleaming lighthouse, the Pharos, shimmering in the Egyptian sun. You squint. It's dazzling, like someone strapped a mirror to a pyramid and decided it should also guide ships. It's the 3rd century BCE, and you're entering one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Alexandria isn't just a place. It's an idea, a buzzing beehive of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and even Indian influences. Here, logic and dreams cohabitate like awkward roommates. And tucked inside the royal library, yes, that royal library, is something small and wet yet wildly impressive. You're not here for scrolls. Not even for the philosophical gossip about Euclid refusing to give anyone an easy way to learn geometry. No, you're here for the legendary water clocks of Alexandria. A kindly scribe named Ammonius greets you at the entrance to a vaulted chamber. The air smells like dried papyrus and sesame oil, and somewhere in the distance, a cat knocks over a stylus. Come, he says. You must see Ctesibius marvel. Ctesibius, now there's a name. He was a barber, an inventor, and the original guy in his garage with ideas. Except his garage was more of a workshop near the Nile, and instead of starting a tech company, he basically invented time pressure. You follow Ammonius past what looks like a decorative fountain but is actually one of the first Klepsidra to use air pressure and siphons. The water doesn't just drip, it moves with purpose, like it has somewhere to be. Ctesibius' most famous clock had a float system that raised a rod as water filled a container. Attached to that rod, a gear system that turned a cylinder engraved with hour markers, maybe even animated figures. When the water reached certain levels, it triggered mechanisms. Birds chirping, doors opening, small bronze monkeys possibly doing backflips. Okay, the monkey part is speculative. But you wouldn't be surprised. Historians still argue whether Ctesibius' Klepsidra were purely for show or if they were also accurate enough for celestial observations. The answer seems to be both. Alexandria wasn't into either slash or thinking. It was a city of why not both? And let's add hydraulics. Ammonius shows you another device. A tall, elegant column with flowing water hidden inside. As the water slowly filled the chamber, a rotating disc turned to indicate the hours, compensating for shorter winter days and longer summer ones. In other words, it was seasonally adjusted. It didn't just measure time. It understood time. And you're suddenly jealous of a glorified vase. What's more, these weren't just used by stargazers or snooty mathematicians. Some Klepsidra were designed for public squares, courtrooms, even temples. Priests used them to time rituals, ensuring that sacred chants matched planetary cycles. Think of it as divine scheduling, no Google Calendar required. One quirky tidbit. Some Alexandrian clocks featured gongs and trumpets powered by compressed air. The idea of time quite literally blowing its own horn makes you smile. It's charming in a steampunk before steampunk sort of way. But perhaps the most impressive thing is how these devices were democratized. Not everyone in Alexandria could afford one, but many people could understand one. That was the point. Knowledge here was meant to trickle down, like water through a finely tuned siphon. Later that night, you sit in a rooftop garden overlooking the harbor. The sky is thick with stars, and somewhere below, a Klepsidra ticks invisibly. You hear the gentle churn of waves, the flutter of scrolls in a soft breeze, and a tiny click as an hour marker shifts position on a bronze cylinder. You sip date wine and breathe deeply. Alexandria moves at its own pace, and for once, so do you. And just as your eyes begin to droop, Ammonius reappears, lantern in hand. He smiles. Did you know we're working on automating temple doors with water and steam? You nod sleepily. Of course they are. You wake with the scent of warmed figs and dust in the air. Alexandria has faded behind you like a particularly vivid dream, and now you find yourself trudging along the well-worn roads of ancient Persia, where sandals meet empire and bureaucracy meets more bureaucracy. You've arrived in the Achaemenid Empire, circa 500 BCE. The sun hangs low over a horizon dotted with ziggurats and date palms, and in the distance, a courier gallops by, shouting something about a message from Susa. The Persian postal system is one of the most efficient in the ancient world. Rain, snow, or scorching heat, these guys will still deliver your clay tablet. But today, you're here for something more precise than mail. Something quietly ticking inside one of the grandest palaces of the time. In the heart of Persepolis, a stately palace complex that practically hums with ceremony, there's a strange artifact tucked behind the throne room. It's not adorned in gold or ivory. It's a plain-looking stone basin, shallow and round, like a birdbath designed by someone with no imagination. But the attendants treat it with reverence. This, they tell you, is a royal water clock, used not just for astronomy or irrigation, but to manage courtly life. The Persians, ever organized, employed flow regulators to keep track of hours during royal audiences. Court was an affair of great formality and fixed timing. Show up late and you might offend the king, who happened to believe he was appointed by Ahura Mazda himself, which is awkward. The court's clock consisted of a copper bowl with a hole in the center, floating in a larger container of water. The bowl would slowly fill and sink over a fixed time period, say 30 minutes. An official, often a priest, would retrieve it, note the passage of time, and repeat the process. Here's the quirky part. This sinking bowl method was also used to time speeches and legal proceedings. If your argument wasn't done before the bowl went under, too bad. Next petitioner, please. Kind of like an ancient egg timer, but for desperate land disputes and cousin-on-cousin lawsuits. Historians still argue whether this was a widely used system across the empire or reserved for elite rituals only. There's some evidence that smaller versions were used in Zoroastrian temples for prayer cycles, while larger setups may have featured in cities like Ecbatana and Babylon. And about Babylon, yes, technically not Persian, but by this time part of the empire. Babylonian astronomers had already refined ways to track the stars and time planetary movements using Klepsidra with stunning accuracy. They even tried to map lunar cycles to predictable intervals. Not bad for a civilization that also believed the gods could be grumpy because of cloudy weather. In Persia, though, timekeeping wasn't just about precision, it was about hierarchy. The king's daily schedule ran like clockwork. Literally. Wake, pray, judge, feast, repeat. Rituals were timed, council meetings were allocated fixed intervals, and even public festivals followed fluid cycles dictated by water clocks. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Time flows, just as power does. You can see why they chose water over sand. As the day progresses, you wander through stone corridors where peacocks strut like they own the place. You overhear a conversation between two administrators discussing fiscal granaries and satrap tax coordination. It sounds thrilling in the way slow-drying paint might be thrilling. Eventually, you're shown a scroll outlining a proposed update to the Klepsidra system. What if they carve channels into the bowls to fine-tune the fill rate? You smile. Somewhere, a Mesopotamian engineer just rolled over in his mud-brick grave. That night, in the candlelit calm of a small chamber, you sit beside a ceremonial Klepsidra, watching the water rise, ripple, and fall. The rhythmic hush of the liquid becomes your lullaby. Someone hums a Zoroastrian chant outside. The stars return in their silent procession. And as another bowl slowly descends into its watery resting place, you feel time melt away, again. The sun barely peeks over the dense canopy as you find yourself deep in the heart of the ancient Maya lowlands. The air is thick with humidity, the scent of damp earth and blooming ceiba trees filling your lungs. Somewhere nearby, a toucan calls out, its echo a cheerful punctuation in the stillness of the morning. You're in a city-state ruled by a priest-king, somewhere around 700 CE. The Maya are known for their towering stepped pyramids and complex calendar systems, but today you're here to witness a different marvel. How they measured time, not with water clocks or sundials, but with the rhythm of their everyday lives and ingenious devices. In a shaded courtyard, a wooden platform holds a series of small pottery vessels filled with water. Each vessel has a tiny hole near its base, allowing water to drip out slowly and predictably. The dripping water marks the passage of short intervals, useful for timing ritual chants and cooking. But that's not all. Nearby, a young scribe points you to a hollowed-out wooden drum suspended on a frame. When filled with water, the drum's pitch changes as the water level rises or falls. A simple but effective way to measure time through sound. The ritual musicians use it to keep a steady beat during long ceremonies, which often last through the night. It's a neat trick, mixing time with tone. You can almost imagine an ancient party playlist, where the soundtrack was water dripping and drums humming, all synchronized perfectly. Historians still debate how widespread these water-based timekeepers were across Maya cities. Some suggest they were mainly used in temples, while others argue that farmers and traders might have used simpler versions to organize daily activities. You suspect it's a bit of both. After all, water ticks for everyone. Meanwhile, the Mayas' fascination with astronomy and calendars is legendary. The long count calendar, for example, marks epochs of roughly 394 years. You might think this is complicated, and it is, but the Maya made it poetic, linking time with cosmic cycles, agricultural seasons, and sacred myths. Oddly, no evidence suggests the Maya developed large mechanical water clocks like the Greeks or Persians, possibly because their rainy environment made sundials less reliable and water flow harder to control. Instead, they relied on the human senses, listening, watching, and feeling time pass. You join a group of elders watching the sunset, marking the end of a ritual day. They recount stories about the gods and the creation of the calendar. Their voices slow and rhythmic, perfect for easing your mind into a restful haze. One elder jokes softly about how time flies faster than a jaguar chasing its prey, which you find oddly comforting. As night falls, the courtyard fills with fireflies flickering like tiny stars come to earth. Somewhere, a small water vessel drips steadily, a gentle heartbeat against the chorus of insects and distant howls. You close your eyes, imagining the soft splash of water echoing through the stone corridors of temples and homes alike, a soothing reminder that even the ancient world knew the delicate art of measuring moments and of letting go. Dawn filters softly through the latticed windows of a Roman villa, nestled on the gentle hills outside Pompeii. The aroma of fresh olives and baking bread mingles with the earthy scent of the volcanic soil, a quiet morning moment forever frozen by Vesuvius's fiery surprise centuries later. But for now, you're fully immersed in the bustling rhythm of Roman life, where timekeeping is as much a social art as it is a practical necessity. Romans loved their hours structured and orderly. After all, they built the roads and aqueducts that shaped civilization for millennia. But clocks, as we know them, were rare and rudimentary. Instead, the Romans often used sundials, portable and fixed, placed in public squares, gardens, and private homes. But here's the intriguing bit. Because the length of daylight changes with the seasons, a Roman hour wasn't fixed at 60 minutes. It was variable, longer in summer, shorter in winter, making the concept of time a flexible dance with the sun. To keep more precise time at night or indoors, some Romans used water clocks or clepsidra. These devices varied widely, but a common design featured a bowl with a tiny hole slowly draining water into a lower basin. Markings on the vessel's interior told the time by the water level. Your host today is a Roman freedman, a man named Marcus, who enjoys timing his afternoon naps precisely, a luxury of leisure he appreciates deeply. He jokes that his water clock never lies, unlike his wife's memory of where she left his sandals. Beyond the practical, water clocks also held ceremonial importance in courts and law rooms. When a speaker's allotted time expired, a water clock would signal the end. No interruptions necessary. It was the ancient equivalent of a polite time's up buzzer, and probably just as anxiety-inducing. Historians still argue whether the Romans adapted Greek designs or innovated their own more complex mechanisms. Some evidence points to clocks with gears and floats, early mechanical engineering marvels that predate medieval clocks by centuries. Another quirky Roman tidbit. They occasionally added fragrant oils to the water to mask the smell of stagnant water, which is one way to make waiting for justice a bit more pleasant. As afternoon light filters through the olive trees, you imagine the gentle sound of water dripping, the ticking of time measured in the steady fall of droplets, all while conversations about politics, poetry, and wine flow around you. Time in Rome was less a cold, unyielding mistress and more a companion to daily rituals, work, feasts, baths, and gossip. You feel yourself unwinding with this timeless rhythm, the water clock marking the slow, deliberate heartbeat of an empire. You find a quiet corner in the villa's atrium, the gentle dripping merging with the rustle of laurel leaves overhead, and surrender to the soothing cadence. The dry wind brushes past you as you step onto the sun-baked earth of ancient Egypt's Thebes, around 1500 BCE. The scent of papyrus and lotus flowers wafts gently through the air, mingling with the faint aroma of burning incense from nearby temples. Here, amidst towering obelisks and sacred statues, time is both a practical necessity and a divine mystery. Egyptians didn't just want to know what time it was. They wanted to align themselves with the cosmos, the gods, and the eternal flow of the Nile. Their day was divided not by fixed hours but by the phases of the sun and stars, carefully observed through shadow clocks and sundials. But let's get to the trickier part. How did they measure time when the sun wasn't shining? Enter the water clock, or Klepsidra, a vessel carefully designed to drip water at a steady pace, usually marked with graduated lines indicating the passage of hours. These water clocks weren't just practical. They had ceremonial importance, used in temple rituals and legal proceedings, marking the hours of night and day with quiet dignity. A particularly fascinating variation involves the use of float devices, tiny wooden pieces that rose and fell with the water level, moving a pointer to show the current hour. Imagine a miniature water-powered clock hand, bobbing along in an ancient Egyptian temple. Historians still debate whether Egyptian water clocks were mainly for ritual or if they served everyday tasks like farming schedules or market hours. Either way, they were precise enough to impress the meticulous Egyptians, known for their engineering prowess. Oddly, some water clocks also incorporated small holes near their bases to allow a slow and controlled flow of water, but the exact designs varied from place to place and time to time. You can almost picture a craftsman, carefully drilling tiny holes with tools made of copper, testing and adjusting for the perfect drip. One amusing fact: some water clocks reportedly leaked more during the hot afternoons, leading to grumbles that the sun stole time, the ancient equivalent of blaming the Wi-Fi for buffering. As you watch a priest measure the night hours by the water clock's slow drip, you feel the steady, calming pulse of time itself. The river flows, the stars will above, and below, water marks the quiet passing moments. You lean back against a smooth stone wall, the flickering light of an oil lamp casting gentle shadows, and listen to the soft, persistent drip, a timeless lullaby. A salty breeze ruffles your tunic as you stand on the bustling docks of ancient Carthage, a thriving Phoenician city-state on the North African coast around 300 BCE. The smell of resin, fish, and freshly loaded amphorae fills the air, blending with the distant shouts of sailors and merchants haggling over exotic spices and textiles. In a city famous for its seafaring and trade, precise timekeeping is crucial, not just for rituals but for navigation and commerce. Carthaginians inherited and adapted many technologies from the Egyptians and Greeks, including water clocks. Here, water clocks become an essential tool for measuring intervals during the long voyages across the Mediterranean. Aboard ships, the gentle, repetitive drip of water became a comforting marker of time's steady march, especially on moonless nights when the stars hid behind clouds. One popular design involves a floating indicator inside a sealed container. As water slowly fills the vessel, the float rises, pushing a small rod or pointer to mark the passage of time. The simplicity and reliability of this system made it popular among sailors who needed to measure watches or keep track of shifts. Yet, maritime timekeeping was far from perfect. The rolling of the ship sometimes caused irregular water flow, leading to debates among historians about how accurate these devices really were at sea. Some suggest sailors preferred measuring time by the position of the sun and stars whenever possible, while others argue water clocks were indispensable on cloudy nights. A quirky anecdote: Carthaginian merchants reportedly used small water clocks during trade negotiations to limit the length of speeches and prevent drawn-out haggling. One trader supposedly remarked that a cleverly timed water clock was better than a sharp tongue for keeping deals on track. Beyond ships, these clocks found use in Carthage's famous legal courts. When a case was heard, a water clock would measure the time allowed for arguments, keeping proceedings efficient and fair. Imagine a judge glancing up as a small water vessel neared empty, signaling it was time to wrap things up, a gentle yet firm nudge from the passage of water. As the sun sets behind the harbor, casting the city in golden light, you sit near the quay, listening to the rhythmic drip and watching as merchant ships prepare for their night journeys. Time, you realize, flows just like the Mediterranean waves. Steady, inevitable, and a little mysterious. You find yourself wandering through a dense forest in the Korean kingdom of Silla, around 600 CE, where towering pine trees whisper softly in the evening breeze. The air is thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, and the fading light filters through the branches like delicate silk threads. Here, timekeeping takes on a more mystical and nature-connected flavor. While the early Koreans adopted sundials and water clocks from Chinese neighbors, they also placed great importance on natural cycles and celestial movements. In royal courts and Buddhist temples, water clocks served both practical and spiritual purposes. The Korean Jaegyeokru, a sophisticated water-driven astronomical clock, was a marvel of engineering, designed to mark hours with precision and signal important ritual times with gentle bells. Picture a complex network of water tanks, floats, and levers hidden in a palace garden, quietly measuring time while monks chant in nearby halls. The clock's slow dripping was paired with the delicate ringing of bronze bells that echoed across the courtyards. Historians still debate the extent of the Jaegyeokru's automation, with some arguing it was an early mechanical clock, while others see it more as a ceremonial timekeeper. A charming folk tale from this era tells of a palace official who once mistook the water clock's bell for a call to dance and ended up performing an impromptu jig in front of the entire court, much to the amusement of the king and courtiers. Meanwhile, common folk relied heavily on natural signs, rooster crowing, changing shadows, and seasonal blooms, to mark the passage of time, making their daily lives rhythmically attuned to nature rather than strict hours. Korean water clocks often included poetic inscriptions, reminding users to reflect on the fleeting nature of time, much like a gentle meditation. As you sit beneath the tall pines, listening to a distant bell and the subtle drip of water, you feel the soothing harmony of nature and human ingenuity entwined, a perfect lullaby for weary minds. The passage of time here feels like a whispered secret between the earth, water, and sky. You're transported now to the bustling marketplaces of medieval Baghdad, during the golden age of the Abbasid Caliphate, around 900 CE. The air is thick with the scent of spices, cardamom, cinnamon, and saffron, mingling with the hum of merchants and scholars discussing everything from astronomy to poetry. In this intellectual and commercial hub, precise timekeeping is essential, not just for prayers and rituals but for the rhythm of daily life and scholarly pursuits. Baghdad's engineers and scholars took water clocks to new heights, inventing intricate devices that combined flowing water with gears, levers, and even automata. Imagine a grand water clock in a public square, with mechanical birds singing or small figures moving in time with the hours. One famous example is the water clock designed by the polymath Al-Jazari. His creation wasn't just a timekeeper but a work of art and engineering, featuring a series of bowls that floated and sank, triggering levers to sound bells and display the time visually. Historians still debate how much Al-Jazari's water clocks influenced later mechanical clocks in Europe, but it's clear his designs were ahead of their time. A quirky detail: some water clocks included compartments that released scented oils or perfumes at specific times, turning timekeeping into a multisensory experience, like a gentle reminder that even moments have moods. In the crowded streets of Baghdad, these clocks helped regulate everything from market hours to the 5 daily prayers, blending science, art, and spirituality. You imagine standing in the square as a soft chime rings, mingling with the call to prayer, and the warm light of lanterns flickers, casting dancing shadows. The water flows steadily, a silent heartbeat beneath the city's vibrant life, and you feel the calm order it brings. Now you find yourself in a quiet, shaded courtyard of a wealthy Roman villa around 100 CE, where the soft gurgling of water fountains blends with the gentle rustling of olive branches in the afternoon breeze. The sun casts long, warm shadows over the mosaic floor, and servants move silently about, attending to their duties. Romans were famous for their engineering prowess, and water clocks, known as Klepsidras, were widely used across the empire to measure time, especially during legal proceedings and public speeches. Imagine a large bronze Klepsidra, with water steadily draining from one vessel to another, its flow carefully calibrated to mark equal hours, even when the sun was hidden behind clouds. This was especially useful in courtrooms, where magistrates timed speeches and witnesses with strict fairness. Interestingly, some Roman water clocks included graduated markings that allowed the adjustment of time measurements to match the uneven hours of daylight and nighttime, reflecting the Romans' practical but precise nature. Historians still debate how widespread these adjustments were and whether ordinary citizens could rely on them beyond official settings. A peculiar story goes that one orator, frustrated by a short Klepsidra, supposedly sabotaged it to extend his speaking time, though whether this is fact or a tongue-in-cheek anecdote remains unclear. Aside from courts, water clocks were common in Roman baths and gardens, adding a calming rhythm to leisure time and encouraging patrons to savor each moment slowly. You picture yourself reclining by a marble basin, listening to the soothing drip of water as conversation drifts lazily around you. The flow of time here feels natural, almost meditative, in tune with the leisurely pace of Roman life. As twilight deepens, the Klepsidra's drip slows and your thoughts soften, blending with the gentle evening sounds of the villa. The steady water reminds you that time, in all its forms, is a subtle companion, always present, quietly guiding, never rushing. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy, let the steady drip of ancient waters lull you toward rest. Imagine the gentle flow, the timeless rhythm of civilizations past carrying you softly into dreams. Let the sounds of distant fountains, quiet forests, and echoing bells fade slowly, like the last gentle waves at the edge of a serene lake. Rest assured that time itself will wait patiently for you, a silent guardian through the night. May you find peace in the calm passage of moments, and wake refreshed with the dawn.